Hi, I'm Carl from Edge Protection New Zealand. Today we're going to take you through our re-roof edge protection system, which has been purpose designed and tested for existing buildings such as a typical lower roof edge we have here, and around the corner showing you how to fit it up onto a gable end as well. So today I'm going to take you through a typical assembly and installation. We're also going to be looking at how to install a safe ladder access gate, as well as getting our rails up in a safe fashion from the ground. Right, so let's get into it. To begin with, if you lay your equipment out in approximately the right location, you will gain greater site efficiency and the install process will run smoothly. It's extremely important during the initial installation process that you determine where the load bearing points are for your edge protection system. Now, if we look up here, underneath the soffit here, we have the clouts. Now these clouts here, or nails, clearly identify where the load bearing points are. There's one here, and there's another one behind it here. This indicates that we have a load bearing right through this point here. We have another one over here, and there is nothing between the two. So there is no load bearing on a plastic jointer. It's extremely important to make sure we get our load bearing points identified before we install the brackets. Always look for the clouts. Right. So for a typical lower roof edge or gutter side, the brackets are simply set up at 0. Making sure the teeth are meshed and tightened with a 17mm socket. The next important part of the process is to install rubber bands. One for each clamp, as the rubber bands will hold the clamps open, ready to receive the rails. We have 5 half clamps per bracket. 3 for the guardrails. They're all oriented with what we call the elbows facing up. And then our rubber bands can be placed on top of that. The other 2 clamps are for the vertical pole, and they go on the opposite side of the guardrail clamps. Again, elbows facing up. Important at this stage just to leave them finger tight until they settle into the pole. Elbows facing up. Not necessary to tighten these fully at this stage, because if you do tighten them and they're off center, the pole won't sit into the saddle correctly. So we leave those finger tight at the stage, and that is now ready to install. Right, so we've identified our load bearing point with our clout and the fibre cement soffit there. Now, for site efficiency, it's quite important to have everything laid out approximately where it's going to be installed. So we've got our base jack directly underneath the clout. We've got our sole board underneath the base jack. We've got our bracket and our pole laid out roughly where they're going to be put together. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get a datum height. We'll take a measurement from the base jack to the underside of the soffit. We will then transfer that measurement onto the pole and bracket assembly, and that will allow us to fix the vertical assembly in place, ready to install. So the important measurement is from the soffit, which is the load bearing point, down to the top of the base jack winder. Now we've got a nice round measurement of 2.5 meters there. Now that's tight. That's from basically the bottom of the pole to the foot mount part of the bracket. So what we want to do is we want to transfer that measurement onto the bracket assembly, and we will first of all place the pole into the bracket. Now that measurement was 2.5 meters tight from the base jack handle to the soffit here. So that's this location here, and we want to give ourselves 100 mils of room. So we're going to go 2.4. Here's our soffit, 100 mils of room. 2.5 is here, we'll go 2.4. Locking off the vertical clamps, they are now situated correctly. Important that we tighten this side also. And one more quick one. That vertical assembly is now ready to install.
You must first lift the assembly and let it roll over with the foot mount facing the ground. This balances the bracket so you won't struggle to erect it. Always check for hazards such as overhead power lines prior to raising the assembly. Once the upright is vertical, you should position the base jack in the centre of the sole plate and secure it immediately with your foot to stabilise the upright prior to turning the bracket and lifting into position under the seat. Ensure the foot mount is located in close proximity to the load-bearing nail line so you don't crack the seat when winding tension into the assembly with the base jack. This can be achieved by one person by holding the upright pressure on the vertical pole whilst reaching down to wind the base jack handle, or a second person can assist. Ensure there is even pressure on the foam pad and that the fascia board is situated correctly between the foot mount and the main bracket. Apply enough pressure to achieve a noticeable bow in the vertical pole. Check that the rubber bands are holding the half clamps open, ready to receive the guardrails. Raising the upright on a higher roof where the bracket is fitted at a greater distance from the ground will require a second person to assist in keeping the base jack grounded whilst the assembly is lifted to the vertical position. Repeat this process for any secondary vertical assemblies, ensuring the distance between the brackets is no more than 5.4 metres. Once all brackets have been installed to one roof edge, you can begin with the guardrail installation. The safest way to achieve this is with a safe lifting device such as the rail racer, which enables all guardrails to be fitted by the installer from the ground. Place the first guardrail into the bottom rail location on one bracket and rest the other end on the ground. Place the head of the rail racer over the guardrail and ensure the clamp locks closed. Carefully lift the guardrail into position over or around the second bracket assembly and into the bottom half clamp. Pull the rope to disengage the clamp and remove the rail racer. Repeat the process for the mid rail and top rail. Horizontal adjustment can be made by pulling the rail racer sideways to line up the guardrails. Consecutive guardrails are fitted in the same manner, but for greater site efficiency and safety, the external sleeve joiners should be fitted to the rails prior to lifting into position. Ensure the joiners are fitted right to the end of the tube and tighten the nut only enough to hold the joiner on the rail at this stage. Fully tightening the joiner will not allow the other end to slide over the rail. This is what a typical assembly should look like prior to accessing the roof to tighten the clamps and joiners. Always secure the base jacks to the sole plates with 50mm Tech screws. In most cases, it will be necessary to provide a means of safe access onto the roof. This is easily achieved with a ladder and inward opening self-closing gate. It will be necessary to fit two brackets closer together to fit the gate. Approximately 1200mm between uprights is typical. Keep the bottom guardrail continuous, as this will provide the location to fix your ladder as well as ensure structural integrity of the system. Ladder clamps are the most effective way of securing your ladder to the edge protection. These should be fitted immediately following your ladder ascent and securing the bottom rail half clamp. The safety gate should be either passed up to the roof or hoisted up with a secure rope. As soon as you transition onto the roof from the ladder, it is most important to remain behind the guardrail assembly at all times. Secure the half clamps and any joiners near the entrance prior to fitting the gate. Ensure the nuts that secure the half clamps to the brackets are tight at this time. Fit a vertical tube over the 3 guardrails and secure it with 3 putt log couplers or 90-degree couplers. Putt log couplers will see less time spent in this location prior to gate fitment. Carefully fit the gate by opening the clamps and blocking the access point with the gate whilst it is secured. Ensure the gate self-closes against the upright assembly and fix off any remaining clamps in this location. The top rung of your ladder only needs to sit in line with the bottom rail. It is not necessary to extend your ladder a metre higher than the bottom rail, as this will only impede a safe transition onto the roof. Use the guardrails and gate as a handhold.
Right, so for a gable end assembly, we're using the same components, except we're adding 3, and we're going to change sides for our clamps. So the foot mount is installed exactly the same way initially, just loosely fitting the nut and bolt, and then taking into account the roof pitch. This roof pitch is approximately 15 degrees, go around 1 click, ensuring the teeth are meshed, tightening it up. Then proceeding with our rubber bands again. Doubling the top one over because it's not as wide through that section. And then we fit what we call the gable end mounts. And that requires 3 of these and 3 nut and bolt assemblies. Now what these do, as opposed to locking the clamp in horizontally, these gable end mounts fit over here. Nut and bolt goes on just finger tight, and what that allows is it allows the clamp to go on and conform to the pitch of the roof, either way. So we'll set the remainder up. Finger tight with those nuts and bolts. They're just holding it in place until we get the whole thing assembled on the roof, and then they become irrelevant. So same thing, elbows facing up. 3 half clamps for the guardrails. Now these ones can actually be fixed off, keeping them in line here. Attach the rubber bands. And then, rule of thumb, vertical clamps are on the opposite side of the bracket to the guardrail clamps. Elbows facing up. Leaving those ones just finger tight. Ready to go. So sometimes it's easier to use a laser rangefinder. The apex of the gable. Just saves mucking around with the tape. 3.2 metres, which equates to 3.1. .2, 3.1. The central bracket will be installed on the left side. There is timber on either side at the apex of the gable, and the consecutive bracket we will be looking for the clout again, which is in here. Not a lot of tension is required. You don't need to wind it too much. What we're looking for is a gentle bow in the pole, which shows it's got good pre-tension. 2.7. We'll go 2.6 to the centre of the foot mount.
At the external corner, you need to keep the upright assemblies on both roof edges between 1 metre and 1.2 metres away from each other, otherwise rail interference may occur if they are too close to each other.
At this point it's a good idea to discuss, it's not a requirement to have the pole dead plumb, it's more about getting direct seat pressure on that foot mount and having as much surface area of that pad in contact with the seat. So we're sitting approximately probably 6 or 7 degrees off plumb, which is absolutely fine. It's important to have the base jacks secured on the sole boards. Two 50mm Tex screws takes care of that. So we've predetermined that these guardrails are going to be long enough for the gable end. They need to stick past the lower roof edge on the gutter side and past the apex of the gable by about 100mm each, which means the centre or the apex of the gable is about 300mm from the end. So we're going to prefix these on. The idea that we're trying to do as much of the pre-assembly on the ground as possible.
By conducting as much of the pre-assembly as possible on the ground, we eliminate unnecessary time spent on the roof, ultimately making the installation process safer.
They're now ready to install at the apex of the gable.
Once the guardrails are fitted in place on one side of the gable end, you can access the roof and approach the external corner, fastening any loose half clamps at this time. It is important to roll the guardrails over at the gable end so that the pre-fitted swivel couplers are sitting in the correct position to receive the guardrails on the other side. Fix off the half clamps and fit 3 putt log couplers or 90-degree couplers to the rails where they intersect on the corner. Fit the final upright assembly only once the second side of the gable end is ready for installation. This will avoid the bracket being dislodged prior to guardrail fitment.
Gentle bow in the pole. Clamps are held open with the rubber bands. Our swivels are ready to receive the last 3 rails.
Position the last 3 guardrails with the rail racer. Then access the roof to tighten the swivel couplers and half clamps at the apex of the gable. Fasten the final 3 half clamps and remove any excess componentry from the roof. The finished assembly should look like this, with the ladder access as close to one end of the roof as practical. A final check over the installation to ensure all clamps are tight and brackets and rails are secure should be followed by filling out the correct handover certificate and displaying it at the access point. Always remove ladders at the end of the working day to avoid any unauthorised access.